Memorial Day weekend and Memorial Day, the older I get, takes on a greater significance to me, and I approach it maybe with more soberness than a reflective soberness than, say, like a July 4. July 4 seems more about the picnic and the fireworks and the birthday party, but Memorial Day is something different, isn't it? There's just something different about it that I so very, very, very much appreciate. I know in reading some history about it, there are over 29 communities in the United States that claim that they are the ones that began Memorial Day, one of which is our own Boalsburg, just out of State College. And if you've never been to Boalsburg for their Memorial Day celebration, make it a destination point. You really should go there. My wife and I have gone a number of times. It's just that old-fashioned kind of Memorial Day celebration. They run it Saturday, Sunday, and Monday, and they got lots of stuff up there. But I understand there's a small town in New York that probably has the best claim on the beginning of Memorial Day. It started as a day to memorialize the Union dead from the Civil War. And I don't know about you, but every time I hear Ashokan Farewell, I think of the Ken Burns series on the Civil War. There's just something about it that they just come together in that. But it's only been since 1971 that Memorial Day is celebrated on the last Monday of the month of May. Some of you might remember that was also the year the federal government moved all the holiday celebrations to Mondays, and so Memorial Day, that happened to it. But before that time, it was called Decoration Day. Remember that? And it was called the day in which you went out and decorated the graves of the soldiers and the sailors, and you used it as a time to remember those things that you must never forget. We must not forget individually, and certainly as a nation. I was reading in preparation for the message this morning that on any given day, in particular weekend day, there are up to 750 people a day who visit the USS Arizona Memorial in Honolulu, Hawaii. And on any given weekend, there may be up to 1,500 persons a day who visit the wall in Vietnam. But both in the case of the USS Arizona, while they normally get 250 people, they expect some 5,000 people this weekend. And on this same weekend, the Vietnam Memorial, they expect anywhere between 6,000 and 8,000 people to visit. Why is it? Why is it that these places hold something that attracts people? There's something so meaningful about these monuments that people just seem to have a natural attraction to that. Why is it? Well, yes, it's about freedom and it's about all of those kinds of things, but really it's about people. It's about remembering people, remembering their lives, remembering their sacrifice. I understand that all of the national sites, whether they be from Valley Forge or from the World War II Memorial to the Korean War Memorial or to Arlington Cemetery, this weekend is the most visited weekend of all the entire year for any of these memorials and for so many more as well, and well it should be. You know, in the church, we gather under the cross of Jesus to remember his life and to remember his sacrifice. The same two things that we are called to remember for our own nation. To remember what he won for us on that cross. Namely, he won for us freedom from the penalty of sin. Up until this point, because of sin that separated us from God, the penalty was permanent disfellowship with God or death. And because of Jesus, we have freedom from that penalty. And it has freed us to live in relationship with Jesus and in a new relationship with each other as brothers and sisters. And I believe that's what Paul wants to so communicate to those Christians in Corinth in 1 Corinthians, that 15th chapter. Take away the Gospels, and if I had to look to one place in the New Testament to learn about Jesus, it's the 15th chapter of 1 Corinthians. Has everything I need to know, has the truth upon which I stand. Paul puts it together in some kind of eloquent way, in his own way, but I believe he was passionate about this passage. This is kind of the rubber meeting the road. The truth is coming out, and it's very in a very condensed and succinct kind of way. He's so passionate. He wants these Corinthians to know the truth about Jesus, that Jesus did die. He was raised from the dead, because he knows they're going to have to stand on this truth in order to withstand those who would contend for their faith in a less than hostile world. The biggest theological problem in Paul's day, and would follow, is this whole troublesome issue of the reality of the resurrection. People doubted. And I think Paul writes this 15th chapter to settle it for the Corinthian Christians. Settle it. Do not doubt anymore. Settle it. Move on. Let's live as disciples. Live in light of what has been given to us. He wants them to call them to remember it, and he wants to challenge them to stand on it, much like Memorial Day is a day that calls us to remember the issues so many gave so much for, so that we could be here today. He wants them to remember everything that Jesus gave, so that they could be where they are. Paul is using such an economy of words. Hear that, an economy of words to sum up the entire salvation history of Jesus in these words. Christ died for our sins. He was buried, and he rose again. There are some scholars who think that was the very first Christian confession, even before Jesus is Lord. Everything you needed to know about the truth of God's work in Jesus is summarized in these 3 short phrases. I think he wants the Corinthian Christians to know that the life, death, and resurrection was a real event that took place to a real person on a real day in a real time, whose implications are enormous, have changed everything about what we know and experience on this earth, which is no different, in a sense, that the message of our national monuments are to convey to us. The national monuments are erected so that we would never forget that these events, they were real events. They took place at a real time in history, and they involved real people that had enormous consequences moving forward. The resurrection of Jesus has enormous consequences for us. Paul even says in a manner of speaking in that 15th chapter, look, if you don't believe me, then maybe you'll believe the eyewitnesses' accounts. You know they're still alive, he says. It's his way of saying and challenging them. Say, go out and ask them. They're still alive. They were there. They saw it. They experienced it. They experienced the truth. Hear it from them. Much like we can do even today with those who are living among us, even here in this sanctuary, who can attest to the events of our nation and say, yes, it was a real event. I was there. Let me tell you about it. Then Paul says, if that's not enough, then let me tell you my story. Because I had an experience of the truth too. And I met the truth on the Damascus Road. He came to me. Let me tell you all about it. It's what I experienced, the truth. He just wants his readers to understand the truth, to stand on the truth. He even writes later on, he'll say, if we don't stand on the truth, if this isn't the truth, he says, then we of all people are most to be pitied. You see, if our Christian lives are to have any integrity, if they're to have any meaning, any purpose, if what we do here Sunday after Sunday means anything at all, it has to be built on truth. It has to be. I mean, that's all we're after in life, isn't it? Truth. Just want the truth. Paul wants his readers to know, those listening, he's passionate. He says, this is the truth. Build your lives on the truth. And part of the reason we come here Sunday after Sunday is to hear the truth. To hear the truth from the Word of God. To see the truth. That's why we have an empty cross. To see the truth of the resurrection. We don't have Jesus on the cross. We have an empty cross to remind us of the truth of the resurrection. But more than that, my prayer for all of us, each time that we gather together, is to more than just hear it or see it. It's to experience it. Much like Paul says. To experience the truth. Because I know and you know that when you experience the truth, that's what convinces you. That's what confirms it for you. That's when it becomes real to you, and to me, it's the experience. And we might experience the truth. Maybe you experienced it today in the music, in the Word, in conversation with one another. In Paul's day, and for years after, there were going to be wave and wave of people, of individuals, and of groups who were going to come and challenge the truth of the resurrection of Jesus Christ. There were going to be those who were going to say it's a piece of fiction, that it was made up from a disheartened and defeated band of his followers. And that's exactly how they felt after the crucifixion, defeated in that upper room, but then the truth came and stood among them. They experienced the truth. Every day we gather, every Sunday is a memorial day to the truth. And it's a day to remember, for me, these words also from the Apostle Paul, for we walk by faith, not by sight. I've got a small scrap of paper that it's in fireproof box that we have in a house, like most people do. Put your important papers in there. And on this small scrap of paper is this verse, with instructions to my wife that that's what I want on my tombstone. I don't even have to have my name, because that's not important. I just want the truth. My dedication to this sacred duty is total and wholehearted. And the responsibility bestowed on me, never will I falter. And with dignity and perseverance, my standard will remain perfection. Through the years of diligence and praise, and the discomfort of the elements, I will walk my tour in humble reverence to the best of my ability. It is He who commands the respect I protect, His bravery that made us so proud. That's part of what is called the Sentinel's Creed. And it's a creed that every soldier who has ever guarded the tomb of the unknown soldier has been able to say without hesitation and without reservation. I think that when it comes to the creeds of the church, the creeds of our faith, we ought to do no less. Not for our sakes, but for the sake of the martyrs who gave all they had, all they could give, so that we could be here today. Whether that be the Apostles' Creed, or the simple 3 phrases, Jesus died for my sins, was buried, and rose again. It does not matter. There is a blurring of the lines on days like these in the church, a blurring of the lines between church and state. I don't have a problem with that at all. But what can't be blurred is that for both church and country, we need to remember the truth and the people who gave their lives for the truth, whether they be a veteran or whether it be a martyr.